Hi fantasy managers, welcome to FPL Team Talks. In this video I'm going to have a look at and talk to you through some of the changes that have happened to FPL this season. Some of them very little has happened, some positional changes that we'll take a look at. One of them is pretty major with the World Cup taking place. We'll have a draft video out of the weekend, we'll look at new players, differentials, we'll go through all that good stuff. So if you like FPL content, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe not to miss anything. In the meantime, let's have a quick look at some of those changes. First up then, one of the most drastic and biggest changes is going to be this year is between game week 16 and 17, you will be given unlimited transfers to change your side. So you'll get a wild card at the start of the season, you'll then be able to change your side as much as you want, ready for the second part of the season after the World Cup, and you still get another wild card. So we still get two wild cards, but in the meantime, we get to transfer everyone back out who we don't want. This is all due to the Qatar World Cup. So to put it in simplistic form, it feels like the FPL league and season is going to be split into two halves. Game week 16 will happen. You'll get a wild card in that half of the season. On the 12th of November, World Cup will begin. That was the last game week for the FPL until Boxing Day, game week 17. In between that time, you can just completely scrap and make your new side. It'll be like starting FPL all over again. You'll get a wildcard first half of the season, wildcard second half of the season. So effectively, it feels like we're getting a third wildcard, but you're forced to play it in game week 16. And you remember, you cannot carry over a wildcard. So you're not going to become, if you haven't used it by game week 16, you're going to lose that first wildcard. So at some point, we're going to have to think, how are we going to make the most of that wildcard in the first 16 weeks? I think it's a little bit too early to look at it. We'll certainly have an investigation on this channel later on about where possibly there'll be good times to wildcard. Do you dead end at certain points? But we'll have a look at that later on. But it feels like a big gap in between now, obviously, the World Cup. I do have to keep reminding myself that I'm not going to be without FPL during that time. There'll be World Cups FPL to do as well. So I'm going to look forward to that. But in the meantime, this is how it's going to pan out. Small changes in terms of positions then. Some players have moved from forwards to midfielders. And this is always quite interesting because they're going to score more points as a forward. So if they're still playing up front, move to a midfielder, then there's a certain sort of quality and benefit that you can get from that. So Maximan's one. He's played a lot of games last season. He always seems to be injury prone, but he came through with a lot of fixtures and a lot of minutes. 6.5 looks a decent price for him in midfield if he's going to continue to play, and you would imagine he will for Newcastle. He's definitely one on my radar. Rodrigo, definitely again. What's Jesse March going to do now with he's got a bit of time on his hands, I guess, without the pressure of getting points to avoid relegation like he did it last season. Shackles off. Will he become a little bit more adventurous? Will Rigo play further forward? If he does, 6 million suddenly looks like a good value player. Same with Hwang. I'm really unsure as to why he's been pulled back. From my experience as a Wolves fan, he did still play quite far forward, and he certainly does for his country. And he's scored international goals since the end of the season. So for 6 million, he's definitely one that's provisionally in my side at the moment. I do think 6 million, he's going to be playing a long way forward. I think he's a great option. Joe Linton at the moment wouldn't interest us too much, I don't think. However, if something happens to Wilson, and if Wood's still out of favour, could Joe Linton play up front? In which case, 6 million looks like a good option. And let's face it, Wilson doesn't have a good injury record. Jordan Ayew, 5.5. Not many owners looking at him. Again, if he gets a run in his side, plays up front. Vieira certainly enjoyed playing with him last season. He looks like a decent player. 5.5 would be a good price. Unsure about his minutes. That would be my only consideration for him. Other position changes then. And midfielders then got upgraded to forwards. We have Jota, 9 million playing up front for Liverpool. It's just minutes for him, especially with the likes of Nunes and Diaz playing now. I don't know if I could really, as a midfielder, I could possibly live with it. As a striker, 9 million, I'm not sure I'm interested in him. Havertz, definitely interested in him. Sterling comes, it'll be interesting to see where he plays it in that side, what his sort of Tuchel's plans is for him. Havertz 8 million. If he's as nailed on as he was at the end of last season and in favour, he could be a great sort of option, FPL asset playing up front for Chelsea. And then Buemo, I don't think we can argue too much. He was playing far forward. 6 million, no. Again, could be worth a punt for Brentford with their fixtures turning. 6 million doesn't look too bad for a player nailed on playing up front. Looking at the other side of the coin, then players that have moved back from a midfielder defender. Some of these are quite interesting. Canos is interesting to see what happens to him. 5 million. And Dallas, again, he just shuffles back and forth. Last year, he moved from a defender to a midfielder, and now he's moving back to a defender. With the likes of Calvin Phillips having been sold, I know they've got a new couple of signings in there. the likes of Rafinha possibly in a way. Will Dallas be moved back into midfield? We'll have to keep an eye on that. If he is, 5 million, even if it's a defensive role, possibly, because he gets those clean sheet bonuses, and he was an absolute legend, not last year, the year before. Everyone will remember, if you're a Dallas owner, that Manchester City game away from home. But Dallas, potentially he'll be on my watch list. I don't think he'll be making that starting 11 until I learn a bit more about him and where his actual place in the team is. One last thing I want to mention, and just purely about prices, it seems that there's a lot of premium assets this year in Premier League in FPL. I mean, lots of Son, De Bruyne, Salah. We could look at Haaland as well. You still got Sterling in double figures as well. But there's a lot of very cheap players as well, and you can pick up, especially in those defensive positions. I mean, Trent 7.5, Cancelo and Robinson both 7, James Chilwell 6. Those are the most expensive defenders. So a lot of people are going heavy at the back. So it does look like it is quite, you've got a bit more flexibility. The only thing I'd say is it looks like they sort of raised the floor a little bit as well. There isn't those cheap players out there. So initially it looked really good when all these prices were released. But when the full game has gone live, there's very little value at the moment. It looks in any 4 million, even 4.5 possibly for defenders, but certainly nowhere else. And when you've got so many cheap defenders, 4.5 defenders aren't really where you want to go. So that's kind of given with one hand, dropping the price of some of those premium and really nice midfield assets and defenders in particular, but also they kind of taken with the other hand and saying, well, there's not really any really cheap options. There's just very few 4 millions. I mean, strikers wise, absolutely nothing there. So I do enjoy it. I do think it's really competitive. You can get some really good players into your side. Certainly for the layperson, it looks really appealing. But those are some of just the changes that I thought I'd whip through for you guys about FPL this season. That's all for this one, and thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, hit subscribe. We'll be coming back at you shortly with the whole video about new signings, who to target in the new season. We'll be looking at our first draft as well. So in the meantime, take care. Speak to you soon.